This is easier because it's one forwarded piece. Let us know when you're ready.
Okay. I am going to start the broadcast now.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to welcome everyone to the PREIS and Tribal Prep Grantee meeting. Before we begin the presentation, I just want to review a few quick administrative items to let you know how everyone can participate in today's web event. And all participants should be able to hear the audio and view all the web slides throughout the presentation. If for any reason you are unable to view any of the information, please follow up and send an email to contact to let us know that you're having any audio issues and or any viewing issues. It's our expectation throughout this webinar that many of your questions and concerns will be answered, and every attempt will be made to answer questions posed by any of the participants throughout the webinar and at the conclusion of the webinar. Quickly, I want everyone to turn their attention to the webinar attendee interface, which is made up of two parts. And on the viewer window on the left, that'll allow for everyone to see what the presenter is showing and sharing on their screen. And you'll also see the control panel on the right. And within the control panel is how you can participate in today's web event. By clicking the orange arrow at the top of the screen, you can open and close your control panel. And to keep your control panel open and or visible from the view menu, please ensure that the auto hide control panel option is not selected on the top of the file menu. Questions may be typed in the question box at any time during and at the end of the conclusion of the webinar. Simply type in your question and click send. We don't anticipate any issues today with the event, but if for any reason technical difficulties arise throughout this event and the audio and or screen views are lost, please attempt to dial in and log back into this webinar through the original invite that you received. And if access is still unable to be regained for any reason, please check your email inbox for updates regarding the rescheduling of this webinar event. But we don't anticipate any issues today, so hopefully that will not be the case. We'll now begin the webinar presentation, and I'd like to introduce Labrita White, and thank you for attending.
Thank you, Jamie, and welcome everyone to the PrEP, Personal Responsibility Education Programs webinar, and this is actually a grantee meeting, kind of all rolled into one for our tribal PrEP as well as for our PrEP Innovative Strategy grantees. Just to review with you the flow for today's meeting, I'll begin with our agenda. Here we are. Welcome and introductions. We have several project officers who are participating in today's meeting, and some of them will be presenting as well. The project officers for both programs include myself, Labrita White, Sarah Axelson, Joel Tinsley, and Itij Bailey. We also have another person who also interacts with the Tribal PrEP program frequently. Her name is Deb Yatsko, who is also participating in today's call, as well as our programs director, Mark Clark. Okay, those are the federal introductions. Also, just moving through our agenda, I want to share with you the first part of our meeting on today. We'll be talking primarily about non-competing continuation applications and how you should submit those. And Sarah Axelson will review most of the information for you regarding those applications. I will then follow with information about our new system, Grant Solutions, that is replacing grants.gov for the submission of your applications. Followed by that, we'll have some information sharing around performance measures reporting, one of our favorite subjects for our PREIS grantees only. And so with that being said, after Sarah has completed her presentation around continuations and some other general updates, we will excuse the Tribal PrEP grantees from the call. You're welcome to stay on, but you may not find it advantageous for you, as most of that information will be directed to the PREIS grantees. Okay? So again, after the performance measures reporting information for the PrEP Innovative Strategy or PREIS grantees only, we'll move into a presentation on evaluation reporting requirements. Again, this segment also of our meeting on today is specifically for the PREIS grantees. And I'd also like to point out The evaluation reporting information sharing is not pertinent to those PREIS grantees who are participating in the PPA study. And I think you know who you are. Many of you are actually assigned to IT's Bailey. And so if you're participating in the pregnancy prevention approaches study, you do not have to remain on the call for the evaluation reporting info. Okay? And it is our goal to end this meeting at 4:30 p.m. All right, and with that being said, we'll move on with Sarah Axelson sharing information about non-competing continuation.
Thank you, Abrita. So you all are familiar already with our federal staff, so we're going to jump right into the content on your non-competing continuation application. As you know, the continuation application is used to request funding for the next fiscal year. And for our PREIS grantees, you'll be requesting funding for year 3 of your 5-year project. Our tribal prep grantees will be requesting funding for year 2 of their 3-year grant project. The continuation application also provides grantees with an opportunity to report on their progress during the current budget year, also to provide a work plan including program and evaluation activities for the upcoming budget year. And finally, we ask that grantees provide a detailed budget and budget narrative justification for the upcoming year to allow for planning. There are a number of required documents that are part of the non-competing continuation application. This list of forms is outlined in the non-competing continuation guidance that you've already received previously from your project officer via email, and it is requested as part of the package. We'll go through each of these items briefly. The federal forms that are required are relatively standard for many of you who've completed this process before. You will submit an SF-424, which is the application for federal assistance, as well as the SF-424A, which is budget information for non-construction programs. The SF-424B provides assurances for non-construction programs. The disclosure of lobbying activities is also required. And finally, grantees are expected to complete the PSL, which is the Project or Performance Site Location form. All of these forms should be accessible in Grant Solutions once you have entered into the system, and we'll discuss how to do that again in just a little bit. But additionally, if you need to download a paper copy for any reason, they are available on the FYSB Intranet website. We'll talk a little bit about the requirements for each of the programs individually. So the project narrative for PREIS grantees, and again, this is specific to PREIS grantees, should include an introduction with a brief summary or overview of the project design. They'll also include a 6-month progress report, which they can see an example template for in Exhibit A in the non-competing continuation guidance. This progress report serves as the supplement or the replacement for your actual PPR progress report, and it includes the goals, objectives, activities, and status of what you've conducted so far. The project narrative for tribal prep grantees is quite similar. It will also include an introduction and a brief summary or overview of the project design. However, tribal grantees will use the project narrative to focus on their needs assessment activities that will be conducted prior to August 1st, 2012, as well as to describe the target population and models that are being evaluated for potential use during implementation. We understand that at this point, grantees may not have solidified all of that information, but we would like you to use the project narrative piece to describe what your plans are as broadly as possible. You'll also include a 6-month progress report. This may be a lot of the similar information that you are including in your performance progress report due April 30th, but it should cover a project goal, needs assessment, objectives, and activities. And again, that's focusing on needs assessment given that this first year is the planning year, and also a status update on activities, those that are in progress, met, unmet, what accomplishments and barriers you've encountered. Both grantee programs will submit a work plan as part of their continuation application. The PREIS grantees will submit one for, again, the next budget year, which is year 3 of their 5-year project. And that will include information on their goals, objectives, and activities for the coming year. There are examples, again, in the non-competing continuation guidance for what documents you could use to complete this work plan. Look specifically to Exhibits B and C. The tribal prep work plan, again, is quite similar. However, keep in mind that this next year will be the first implementation year for tribal prep grantees. So their work plan should focus as much as possible, if not wholly, on implementation activities. Again, some of those may not be completely solidified, but please include as much detail as you can about the things that you plan to do during this next year of the project. And Exhibits B and C, likewise, in the tribal prep continuation guidance, provide templates that you can use if you so choose. Both grant programs, PREIS and tribal prep, will include a budget and budget narrative as part of their continuation application, and this is one of the final broader pieces that have to be included. We expect grantees to provide a detailed budget. You'll see here some information about what that might look like, a spreadsheet with an itemized budget that clearly delineates how each object class category of cost was derived. Grantees should also submit a budget justification that clearly describes how the budget items directly relate to the completion of the program activity. And finally, they have the option of submitting an indirect cost rate agreement as applicable. And you'll see there a website that provides additional information on indirect cost rates if you need that. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Labrita White, who's going to review the online submission system and process for using grant solutions to submit your non-competing continuation.
Thank you, Sarah. I just want to point out before walking through the slides that you should have received several an email with several slide presentations for today's meeting. We're currently operating under the first one, which is the actual grantee meeting set of webinar slides. And within those slides, there are some edits that I want to bring to your attention before we walk through. Wanted to give you as distinct information as possible related to how to utilize grant solutions. So you will see some slides. They will be in the same order, but they may have some additional detail as far as instructions. And please note that we will make those available to you after the webinar, either this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning. But definitely wanted to share that with you. And as I said, Grant Solutions is a replacement system for grants.gov. And in order to access the system, you would go to www.grantsolutions.gov. Many of you may already be familiar with the system. If you have other federal grants, and those federal grant programs or offices have already begun to use this new system for processing grant actions. Okay. I do also want to bring your attention to one other thing. In the instructions, the guidance document that you received on how to submit your non-competing continuation applications, we indicated definitely the federal government's desire at this point is to go electronic to reduce paper, and so to utilize grant solutions. However, if you do not have the appropriate technology within your grantee site to submit the documents, there is a mail-in option, and you would want to refer to the guidance document for instructions on how to do so and what justifications are needed in that case. Okay, first of all, what we've requested on the federal level is that you submit, grantees would submit a user request form. We've received quite a few of those over the past several days. If you have not submitted those forms, please make certain that you submit those as soon as possible. They were due on April 16th. And that form will give you those persons within your site who are authorized to make application on behalf of your organization. It gives them access to the system. So please, again, make certain that you submit those documents. If you need another copy of the request form, please contact your individual project officer. All right, and this is what the system looks like when you actually enter the web address, the web link into your web browser. This is the actual home page or home screen. This is where you will actually log into Grant Solutions with the grantsolutions.gov link. And what you see here is in the gold is where you click on to actually go into the login page. But I also want to point out on this screen, you'll see a notation that's with an arrow that says contact information for technology support. There's a phone number here that you can call if you're having difficulty once you receive your access information and passwords. Also, there is a web address that you can contact. It's help@grantsolutions.gov. This is the actual login page for Grant Solutions. On this page is where you will actually type in your username that's provided through the system after you submit your user request form, as well as your password. Okay? If you run into difficulty with forgetting your password or get locked out of the system because you enter it incorrectly several times, you can actually obtain new login information directly through the system. You do not need to contact the help desk or your project officer. You would simply click on to reset password, unlock account.
You get 3 of 2. 3 of 2.
Okay, and next, just want to share with you accessing your application. Once you log into the system, you're going to actually click on to manage amendments, and then you'll select what type of action. For the purpose of this webinar and the instructions given today, you'll be utilizing the system to upload your NCC or non-competing continuation application. Okay, and once you click on to manage amendments, the system will take you into a section where you actually upload your application and those supporting documents related. Those documents that Sarah has just reviewed with you, those are the ones that you'll actually be completing those application documents within the system or uploading a copy. The preference is for your SF424 and your SF424A forms that you actually complete those documents directly in the Grant Solutions system. Okay? And this is referred to on this page as your application control checklist. And you'll see to the left, to the far right, there's like a triangle with an exclamation and some check boxes that indicate those actual icons indicate those areas that you should be completing. Okay? And if you have questions about how do you upload your narrative information, those non-federal forms, but your narrative that tells us how you've progressed over the past 6 months and what you plan to do in the future 6 months, that information would be uploaded under miscellaneous information, which is located on your screen at the very bottom.
Labrita?
Yes.
This is Amanda. I just wanted to point out for the very first link that the grantees need to click on, they actually don't need to click Manage Amendments. They can click Apply for Non-Competing Continuation Award. It's the link right under that one.
Okay. It's not shown here, but Amanda Tab, who just chimed in, and thank you, Amanda, is our Grant Solutions liaison. This is a new system to FYSB as well as to some of our grantees. So thank you, Amanda, and feel free to interject any other comments as we move through.
Thanks.
Okay. And what Amanda referred to is most recently the information that grantees received for non-competing continuations, those hard copy documents or emailed electronic copy documents such as the checklist and the guidance documents, that information is now uploaded into the system. So at this point, Amanda is saying you'll actually be directed to non-competing continuations versus amendments. Okay, and we've referred to already some of the information that's stated here on the screen in the previous slides. Again, the application control list checklist is where you have options to do the following. You can fill out forms, download documents and instructions that we just discussed. You can upload files or documents and also submit and unsubmit your application. Also here, entering and saving online form information. To enter online form information, select the Enter Online link. That's pretty self-explanatory. Associated with the item you wish to fill out. For example, the SF424A, and there is a box within that control checklist where you can click on to provide that information. When you are done entering the info, select the Save button at the bottom of the screen. You don't have to fill in all of the information in one session. You can always save and go back and return at a later time. However, the online forms must be validated before you can submit the application. In reference to validating online form data, upon completing the online form information, select the Validate button. At the bottom of the page, any validation errors such as missing required data will be presented to you. Usually that's in red lettering. If you are filling out the 424A form, the system will prompt you to copy the budget information over to the 424 form, and you would select yes if you wish to do so. And here's a screen that actually gives you a visual of how to upload an attachment. You simply click onto upload to load a file or a document. You will be prompted within your browser of your computer to actually locate the desired file or document for uploading to Grant Solutions. And that's just general additional information regarding uploading a file that we've already reviewed. And finally, you'll be able to view your full application once all of the documents have been uploaded and submitted. To complete your application electronically, you enter the information by using the online forms or adding attachments. And then required items are noted by an exclamation. I want to point that out to you by an exclamation point image. And you'll see that circle here on the screen. If an enclosure has not been verified, a red X image will likely be displayed. Okay, and submitting your application. Once you've completed your application, click the Verify Submission button at the bottom of the page. Then click Final Submission. Your application has now been submitted to the grant staff for review. And this is just another screen that gives you a visual for what the final submission, where to find or locate the final submission button. Just some reminders, and we'll continue to remind you throughout today's meeting. Submission of continuation applications, those notifications were mailed on April 29th, so all grantees should have received that information from Lux, which is our grant review and other support, grant support contractor. If you did not receive that notification, please contact your project officer immediately for a copy. Grantees are to submit non-competing continuation applications via Grant Solutions not later than May 29th. You can submit before May 29th, but the deadline, again, is as stated. Your user request forms, again, were to be completed by the authorized representative and project director and submitted to the assigned project officer for access to Grant Solutions. A reminder, if you have not received your access to the system, please forward those forms as soon as possible, and I would say not later than tomorrow, to your project officer, to your assigned project officer. At this time, are there any questions regarding non-competing continuations or the Grant Solutions system? We do have Amanda Tapp, who's on the line with us. So if you have any specific Grant Solution questions, I would say to you, ask those now. And you can type those in. There is a question that states, what about the form SF425 that is to be turned into OGM, says to send original and copy to OGM? Can this be done by email instead of paper? Yes, it can be submitted electronically. You can mail it in or submit electronically. And for, let me just clarify, for the PREIS grantees, your SF425 will not be due until December of 2012. But for the PREIS, for the tribal prep grantees, your SF425s are due semi-annually, okay? Tribal prep, semi-annual, SF425, PREIS, annually. Please confirm that the 6-month progress report covers October through March for PREIS. Yes, that is correct. Technically, September 30th, but yes, October through the end of March. Can we have additional users for grantsolutions.gov? Yes, you can. However, right now we're trying to make certain that we at a minimum have the project directors and the authorized reps in the system, but you can also make requests for other persons to have access. Depending upon what their role is with the project, they may have limited access to only view. Some of the financial accounting persons within your program may have the option to upload some fiscal information, but everything has to be officially submitted to us by your authorized representative. Okay, another question, can Word or Excel documents be uploaded into Grant Solutions, or do uploads have to be in PDF format? You can upload, Amanda, I'll ask you to answer that question, but I think the answer is all types.
Yeah, we accept all standard file types, so Excel, Word, even images, things like that. Everything you can upload, and if it does not upload, you'll actually get an error message when you try to upload it, telling you that the upload has failed. And then if it's successful, similarly, you get a message saying upload successful.
Thank you, Amanda. So all documents, your Word, your Excel, as well as your PDF documents can be uploaded. There's a question about due dates for the tribal prep as well as for the PREIS grantees. The due date for non-competing continuations is April. It's May. I'm sorry. It's May 29th. May 29th. And someone has asked where you can obtain the user request form. Please contact your project officer. You can email them now or after the meeting today, and they'll be certain to forward a copy of that to you.
And while we're waiting for other questions, I just had one other thing to add, Librito. This is Amanda.
Sure.
Sorry.
Sure.
Similarly, how you're contacting your project officer for the user account forms, you should contact them if you have any questions about filling out your form, how to fill out forms or how to do your budget narrative or project narrative. And you should only contact the Grant Solutions Help Desk if you're experiencing a technical error. So for instance, if you click something on the screen and the screen goes blank and says system error, then you should contact the help desk. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Okay, Amanda, we have another question that you probably can help us with as well.
Okay.
This question is, we have a Grant Solutions account from a previous grant process. Do we need to initiate a new one for PREP?
No. If you have a previous account for the same organization, which means you've registered with the same EIN and DUNS number with CCR, then you should not need to fill out a new form. When you log in, you should actually have access to your current grant, all of them.
Okay, and if they do not have access to their PREP grants, what's the next step?
The first step would be to contact their program specialist to make sure that they're assigned to the grant. And the second step would be if they're still not able to see it, then you should contact the help desk on their behalf.
Okay. And does it hurt if grantees who already have an account also request a new account based on the PREP program?
No.
Okay. And let me just clarify for some grantees who said, well, you told us we had to submit a form. And yes, we did. And as Amanda said, there's no harm in submitting if you've already been connected with the program. But we also want to verify and make certain that the appropriate persons within your program are requesting access to the PREP grant. So that's just a point of clarification regarding that process. And that appears to be all of the questions. Is there one more?
There's one more regarding performance progress reports, but we're going to clarify that in the next couple of slides, so I think that will help. And if not, we will come back and address that when we do questions at the end.
Oh, and just so everybody is aware, when you log into Grant Solutions, there's going to be a Help tab up on the top menu, and on that tab you'll actually find recorded webinars where you can watch how to submit a continuation application, as well as a manual.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Amanda. And also I would ask grantees to refer to the grantee guidance document that was submitted for non-competing continuations that also shows the web link for those training and resource materials for using the system. Thank you so much. And I think we'll move on to the next segment of our meeting for today. And Sarah is going to give some additional updates, and after which we'll hear from Ina Wallace as well as Amy Favre. Ina Wallace is with RTI International, and Amy Favre is with the Office of Adolescent Health. And again, we'll move on to our fun topic for our PREIS grantees about performance measures. But hang in there, grantees, Tribal Prep. Sarah's going to share additional information that both programs need to be aware of.
Thank you, Labrita. So we're going to talk about performance progress reports and I think clarify a little bit of the confusion around these requirements because they are a little bit different for each program. Tribal Prep grantees need to complete performance progress reports on a semi-annual basis. This means that their reports are due 30 days after the end of the second and fourth quarters of the budget period, or every 6 months. You'll see here that this means that a performance progress report will be due April 30th of this year and October 30th of this year. For purposes of the April 30th report, Tribal Prep grantees, and again, only Tribal Prep grantees, will complete this report using the PPR template that was sent to them via email by their project officer, and will return that template again via email to their project officer by April 30th. In contrast to the Tribal Prep grantees, PREIS requirements for performance progress reporting is a little bit different. Performance progress reports, or PPRs, are due on an annual basis. However, as part of the continuation application, PREIS grantees also report on their progress during the previous 6 months. So you'll see here that it lists a performance progress report due May 30th with the non-competing continuation. Again, this is simply that section of your continuation application that speaks to 6-month progress report. It's not a separate form. The reporting period for that form, and one slight correction, it's actually May 29th. We will correct that on the final slides before we send them out. Again, the reporting period for that progress section of your continuation application is September 30th, 2011 to March 31st, 2012. PREIS grantees will then also submit a performance progress report using the PPR template in OLDC or that's already been sent to you by your project officer. That will be due October 31st, 2012, covering the reporting period of April 1st through September 29th, 2012. So again, for PREIS grantees, one 6-month progress report that is folded into your continuation application due May 29th, reporting on the previous 6 months, and then one annual progress report due October 31st using the PPR template. We'd also like to give you a brief update about some upcoming trainings, just to be sure that your calendars are marked. For PREIS, there's a Western Regional Training that will be held June 12th through 13th in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and an Eastern Regional Training to be held June 28th through the 29th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You should have received a notification regarding which location you would be assigned to as a grantee to attend via email, and if for any reason you have a concern about that, you can speak directly with your project officer, but we are asking you to attend the location that you have been assigned to for planning purposes. Tribal Prep grantees will also have a webinar on adulthood preparation subjects. That will be on May 22nd, 2012 at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we will be announcing additional trainings at a later date.
Sarah, can I interject one thing? In regards to the, you know what, I'll hold off on that. Go ahead.
Okay, just a reminder again, if we haven't mentioned it enough, about some critical due dates that we want to make sure you're aware of. The first slide is for PREIS grantees only. Your continuation application is due May 29th. Your performance measures upload and evaluation report, both of which we will discuss after this portion of the webinar. That will be what Labrita was discussing with Ina Wallace from RTI and Jean Knapp from Mathematica. Those are both due May 31st. On July 16th, we request that PREIS grantees submit earlier than that if possible, but no later than that date, any budget revisions for year 2 that need to be processed. On October 31st, PREIS grantees will need to submit their year 2 performance progress report, again using the PPR template. And then on November 30th, they'll need to do their final performance measures upload and evaluation progress report for this budget year. On December 31st, they will also have a year 2 financial status report due. The tribal prep grantees also have a slide for critical due dates. Again, as you all are aware, you have a semi-annual performance progress report due April 30th, and you also have a semi-annual financial status report due April 30th using the SF425. Like the PREIS grantees, your continuation application is due May 29th. We also request that for tribal prep grantees, any budget revisions to their year 1 budget be submitted by July 16th. And then, as you should know already, your implementation plans will be due August 1st. We will be sending out additional information about the implementation plan shortly, and we will also be holding sessions on the implementation plans at the upcoming conference. So don't be concerned if you haven't received information about that yet. On October 31st, tribal prep grantees will have another semi-annual progress report due, and on December 31st, they'll have another semi-annual financial status report. At this time, we'll take a look and see if there were any other questions that came in during that last portion of the webinar. The only other question that we had, again, was regarding the progress report, but I hope that we have answered that sufficiently. We did just get one question come in that says, can we use the PPR template for this reporting period? This is for a PREIS grantee, and upload it in Grant Solutions as our project narrative. And the answer to that is yes, you can do that if that is your preferred method of reporting on your progress for this reporting period. But again, always go back to the guidance if you have questions about how to, what kind of format you should use or how to upload your information. There's another question that says, please clarify if we submit our PPR via OLDC, email, or grantsolutions.gov for this May 29th deadline and also for the end of the year report. This will differ based on which grant program you are in, and the question comes from a PREIS grantee. So for PREIS grantees, for the May 29th report, you can fold that report into the narrative of your continuation application and not have to submit a separate PPR form. If you prefer to use the PPR template, as the previous question was alluding to, you can do that, and you would then upload that into Grant Solutions with the rest of your continuation application package so that we are clear that all of the required pieces for the continuation application package are there. For the end of year report, you will use the PPR template and you'll submit that via OLDC. I don't see any other questions at this time. So at this time, we would like to thank the tribal prep grantees for participating. We're going to dismiss you all from the webinar so that we can continue with information that is pertinent to our PREIS grantees. So tribal prep grantees, you're free to go. Now we'd like to hand it off to Ina Wallace from RTI International, who will be presenting information for all of our PREIS grantees on the performance measures report.
Hi, hi, I am here.
Great, thank you.
I hope you can hear me. Great.
Yes,
Great. Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I have met many of the PREIS grantees previously, met them at the annual conference, so it's real nice to be in touch with you again, and some of you I have actually spoken to before since we've been back in regard to this. So some of this may be old hat for some of you, and some of it may be newer. So we're going to review what it is you need to do for reporting your performance measures. Okay. I am not seeing on this how I advance it.
Ina, we'll take care of that for you. If you just want to let us know next slide, we'll be happy to.
Okay. Okay, next slide, please. First thing I wanted to let you all know are the various resources that are available for you to use in completing your performance measures and reporting them. First of all, we have a website, and I think that every grantee has already registered with one or more individuals. So that is great. And I hope you've had a chance to look at it and get familiar with it. There is a manual for using the website that you can access right on the website. And I did want to let you know that we are in the process of revising it. We had to make some changes to the website, which were completed last week. And now that the changes are complete, we are finishing the manual, and we will let you know by means of an email when the changes to the website manual are complete. There are also recordings and transcripts of the different webinar trainings that have occurred this year, and you can find them on the Performance Measures website under Resources. You will see them. They're also on the OAH website, and we've given you the links here. We're going to talk later about the perceived impact measure, and we developed a script for your usage, and that is on the website. We have a help desk request on the website, and we hope that this is something that if you have questions you will use. When you do this, your question is logged. It is sent to our webmaster, who either answers it himself or forwards it to another member of the team. And the advantage of using that as opposed to my email or somebody else's email is that he monitors it all the time. When I leave here at the end of the day, I rarely have my laptop with me, so your question will have to wait till the next time I'm in the office. So it's much better to use the help desk, because your question will be addressed then or sent on to who needs to address it. And then as we find out there are other resources you need, if there are things that you want, you let us know and we will post them. Next slide, please. There are 3 different ways for you to report your data to us. And I want to discuss them because they are, it's important that you understand what the differences are, because we want to make sure that you will be selecting one and using it properly. Option 1 is reporting your raw data directly into the web system. And we have set up fields to make this as easy as possible. And this is a particularly good way for any of you who don't have a large number of participants in your study. Option 2 is including the same kind of raw information, but using spreadsheets with predefined variables. And we have those spreadsheet templates right on the website for your use. Option 3 is entering aggregated data into the system. And only grantees who have approval will be able to do this and will see the fields that they need to enter the aggregated data. Now, to date, we've given only a very few grantees permission to use, to enter data in this fashion. And those who have done so have submitted detailed plans as to how they will calculate everything. And most of the ones who have been given permission are doing so because their data is coming from another system. There are a few who were given permission because they're collecting data from several thousand students. Most individuals have elected to use either option 1 or 2, and we strongly recommend that because you will not be the one who will have to calculate everything, and some of these calculations can be rather complex. Next slide, and one thing I have at the bottom, that you need to indicate your selected reporting option to your project officer no later than Wednesday, April 25th, which is this Wednesday. And if you select option 3, you're going to have to indicate how you're going to calculate all of those different measures. Okay, we're ready for the next slide, please. I wanted to go through the different measures that we have and how it is we'll be able to report them. The first group of measures are those that concern program structure. And the first one is our measure of reach. And reach is how many participants the program is actually is reaching. And for your purposes and our purposes, it will include all program participants, regardless of whether or not they are in the evaluation. That's an important point to remember. So even if they don't have permission to be in the evaluation, they should still be counted if they are receiving program services. And we have several measures. We have the number of youth served by different demographic characteristics, and we have the number of other types of clients who are served, such as parents. For reporting, option 1 and 2 grantees will report participant-level demographic information, and we will be able to calculate reach because we will have your attendance data. Those who are using option 3, or aggregated data, will need to do this classification by demographic characteristics before entering it into the system. And there are a lot of demographic characteristics. Okay, next slide, please. The next grantee level measure is that of partners. And what we're asking are the number of organizations partnering with the grantee with formal agreements, without formal agreements, or just currently assisting in implementing the program. And then we're also asking for retention of partners. That is the number with formal agreements who are involved with you at the end of the reporting period. All grantees will be entering aggregated data on the website. So there's no option 1, 2, or 3 here. Everybody will be reporting aggregated data. Next slide, please. Our next measure is training. And we are interested in you reporting any type of training that improves the facilitator's delivery of the program. It's not just the curricular material. So these are some examples of things that you might include. If your facilitators go to a workshop on classroom management or on adolescent development, that would count. If you have any question about whether a training that your facilitators receive would count, contact your project officer. The measures that we're collecting are the number of new facilitators trained during the reporting period and the number of facilitators who receive follow-up training. And for reporting, all of you are to report aggregated data on the website. Next slide, please. Our next measure is dissemination. And for this measure, we are interested in those kinds of manuscripts and presentations that you disseminate to the public. But the material should be related to the funding through the PREIS grant. And they might include your experiences in implementing your program, the kinds of lessons you've learned, the results of your evaluation, anything that concerns this particular grant. And the measures that we're asking you to report on are the number of manuscripts that are accepted for publication or were published. And if they've been published, we'd like you to give the publication information. We'd like you to provide us with the number of manuscripts submitted for publication, the number of presentations you've made by level, and by this we mean at a local, regional, or national level, along with the title and where it was you presented it. And finally, the packaging of your programs for replication. And all grantees are to report aggregated data on the website. Next slide, please. Our next kind of grantee level measures are those that are concerned with program implementation. And the first measure is dosage. And by this we mean how much of the program the participants received. And we're using attendance to calculate dosage. And just like REACH, it will be collected on all participants, even those not in the evaluation. So again, individuals may not have permission to be in the evaluation, but they still should be counted for dosage. So the measures, we are interested in the mean and the median percentage of program services that are received by youth, and we need to have this information calculated by gender and age. We're also interested in the mean and median percentage of program services received by all other types of participants. And then we're interested in the percentage of participants that received at least 75% of the program. And again, for youth, we need this by gender and age. Now the reporting, option 1 and option 2 grantees will report attendance data for every participant, for every session on the website or by uploading spreadsheets. And I've spoken with some of you, and some of you have situations that are not straightforward. You might have a couple of different kinds of types of programs, some that are, individually based and some that are group based. And if you have questions like this, send them to us and we will work with you and your project officer to determine how it is you should, report this information. For individuals who are using option 3, the data will need to be aggregated by the combination of gender and age, again, and I know this can get a little bit confusing, which is why we're urging you to choose options 1 or 2. Next slide, please. Our next measure of program implementation is Fidelity, and this will address how well the implementation adhered to the program's model. And we have a couple of different ways of measuring this. We're measuring based on the facilitator reporting, and so we will be asking you to report on the percentage of completed sessions for which there is a Fidelity monitoring log, and then the mean and median percentage of activities that are completed. Then we are also asking for 10% of the sessions to be observed. And for every session that's observed, we'd like the observer to complete the exact same Fidelity monitoring log that the facilitators use. And we'd like the mean and median percentage of activities completed to be reported. And there's an additional measure, one that is a measure of quality assessment, and we will be asking you to report that as well. We'll also ask you to report the percentage of sessions that were completed and a score on a Fidelity process scale. That, however, will only be measured once a year, and you will not have to report on that until next November. So option 1 and 2 grantees will report the required data for each session on the website or by uploading spreadsheets and aggregated data for the additional measures on the website. Option 3 will report aggregated data on the website. Again, for those of you who have unique situations in that you don't really have sessions, please contact us and we will work with your project officer to help you figure out what it is you need to report. Next slide, please. So we have some participant level measures. The first is our measure of perceived impact. And this is to be collected, we hope anonymously, either at the end of the program or annually for longer programs. And I apologize that I don't know how many of you have long or standing programs. But if you have a program that extends beyond a year, we ask you just to collect this once every year, a minimum of once every year. You also will need to collect demographic data along with the perceived impact measure so that we can analyze it. As I mentioned, we have provided a sample script for you to facilitate the administration of the questions, because we know there was some issues about how the questions were worded and whether students would understand it. So we have tried to provide some clarifications that you can use. And again, it's on the website under the Resources tab. And there are 4 measures that are listed. Reporting. All grantees must report non-aggregated data either on the website or by uploading spreadsheets. There is no option 3 for these data. Okay. Next slide, please. The second group of participant level measures are the measures of behaviors and intentions. And these are to be reported by the evaluators, not the grantees. And you're asked to report baseline and follow-up data for intervention and control groups if the youth have parental permission to be in the evaluation. And there's a variety of measures of both behaviors and intentions. And there are also some additional measures that are not listed here that are used in order to route the questionnaire. So it's more than 6 questions. It's more than these questions that are listed here. But for some youth, there may not be a lot if they haven't yet engaged in any sexual activity. Next slide, please. So oh, wait, we went too far. One back, please. That's it. Thanks. Okay. So the comparison groups. Now, all of you are doing rigorous evaluations, so you will have comparison groups. Your comparison groups need to, they are involved in the evaluation, and we would like you to collect and report the behavioral and intention data if they're participating in the evaluation. If they're not participating in the evaluation, they're not part of the control group. So you will report those data, and you will report those data for pre-test and any post-test times that you have. Do not administer the perceived impact on comparison use because they're not in the program, so they wouldn't be able to address this issue. Do not report attendance data on comparison use because they're not in the program. And do not report Fidelity for any comparison group. All you need to report on is the behavioral and intention data along with demographics. Next slide, please. Now, there will be some program use who may be in the program but do not have parental permission to be in there. This might be a situation in which everybody in a particular grade is being given a program. And so they're automatically, if it's a school situation, they're automatically going to receive the program. But they may not have permission to be in the evaluation. In these cases, you need to provide information regarding reach and dosage, but you would not be administering them any of the other kinds of information, other kinds of measures, such as the perceived impact questions or the behavioral data. Next slide, please. Okay, the reporting dates, and we've gone over this before, but just so you remember, all data are to be reported twice a year, and they're to be uploaded no later than November 30 and May 31st of each year. The May 31st report includes data from September 30 to March 31st, and the November 30 report includes data from April the 1st to September 29th. We urge you to enter your data early. You may have questions, and we're just not going to be able to address all your questions if you all wait until May 27th to start, entering the data. And as we said before, those who wish to use option 3 need to send their project officer a detailed description of the system for approval. And that will be by this Wednesday. Next slide. Thank you. If you have questions, I want to remind you to use the help desk request on the website or contact your project officer. And this is what the help desk screen looks like on the website. And you can see you will be entering your contact information, your telephone number, your name, and when you click it, it will go to Eric, who is our webmaster. So I will entertain some questions now, and Amy Farb from OAH is on as well, so she might be able to answer some questions also.
Thank you, Ina. We do have we do have 2 questions that came in regarding performance measures.
Sure.
The first says, Ina, I was hoping to do option 2 because Mathematica is doing the spreadsheets for us. I do need to use option 1 for Fidelity observation forms. Is this okay?
It's absolutely fine. You can mix and match. No problem.
Great. The second question says, since we have not yet entered training data on the website, should we report all training that has occurred to date? So just for this reporting period, we would tell you about initial training as well as all follow-ups that have occurred from September of 2010 through March of 2012.
No, my understanding, and I'll let Amy clarify this if I'm wrong, because a lot of what you were doing previously was sort of piloting and getting things ready. We want it to begin with September 30 of 2011. Amy, have I misstated anything?
No, that's fine. I mean, if they were doing a training the day before or 2 days before that really was, full-blown part of the program, then we don't want to discourage anyone from entering that, but we don't want all the early stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, it doesn't appear that there are any other questions coming in at this time. So now we're going to turn it over to Jean Knabb, and we would like to dismiss the PPA study grantees at this time. If you are in the PPA study, you do not need to stay for this final portion as you have different requirements.
Right. I want to definitely thank Ina Wallace as well as Amy Farr for joining us for the performance measure portion of our meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And
now we'll hand it over to Jean.
Great. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, this is Jean Knabb of the Eval TA team, and I'm going to talk about your annual reporting requirements regarding evaluation progress. And some of you have already gone through this process. You had data collected in the fall and have already submitted your assessment of that data to us. Some of you were able to attend a webinar in the fall on this, but weren't able to go through the process yet on your own. So we just wanted to make sure that we presented a little refresher for you that includes a brief overview of the requirements, some illustrative examples, and then an opportunity for you to ask questions as well. You can go to the next slide. So to assess your evaluation progress, we're going to request specific details on two key aspects of your evaluation, and that's sample intake and baseline equivalence. And these are important aspects of the evaluation that are too detailed for us to cover on our monthly phone calls. So we're going to use the annual and mid-year reporting process to collect this information from you, and you saw earlier in the presentation the deadlines for those. Once we get that data from you, we're going to look at that data and then provide you back a written assessment of where the evaluation currently stands with regards to the HHS evidence standards. And then we'll also review that data with you on a monthly call to discuss how you can use that to inform your evaluation implementation, your data collection, and ultimately your analytic plans. So one question people might ask is, how is this data valuable to us now? So two things that we're going to ask for, again, are the sample intake, which we're going to have you put in through a consort diagram, and then also the baseline equivalence. So if we look at the consort diagram now, it's really valuable for pinpointing sample loss throughout the intake and data collection process. And understanding where you're losing samples, such as not turning in consent forms or absent for surveys, or disproportionate loss from, say, one particular site or demographic group, is really important for improving implementation processes for either the current cohort or for future cohorts you might enroll. And examining baseline equivalence on a partial sample will allow you to determine whether there are baseline differences on key measures so large that would not allow you to attribute the impact to the intervention, and therefore the study would not meet HHS evidence standards. So if you observe these group differences early on, you could potentially target data collection efforts to rectify those differences, for instance, on demographic characteristics such as age, by spending additional resources on targeted follow-up with certain students. So you can change that slide. So first I just want to start with some general guidance, some questions that we get from people. The first thing is, do not provide data on your evaluation pilot. I know some people have still been implementing pilots recently. For our purposes, we're not interested in assessing the evaluation pilot data, only the final evaluation sample that would go in your final report. Next, we want you to provide data pooled across cohorts and sites currently enrolled. Most people don't have multiple cohorts enrolled yet, although some have some very short-term cohorts that they might actually have started on a second cohort. But essentially pool the data across all the cohorts and all the sites that you have. However, we do encourage you to look at data separately by cohort and site because you might find that your first cohort of youth is not baseline equivalent simply by chance, and knowing that early on would allow you to target your recruitment and data collection efforts for round 2 to attempt to rectify this for the full sample. We're asking everyone to provide equivalence data for up to 2 samples, and this is what's a little different from our last request. So the first request is the same. We're saying everybody who is in your full sample at baseline, please present baseline equivalence for those groups. And again, that might be like, say, the full sample for your first cohort and a partial sample for your second cohort aggregated together, and that's fine. The new request is, if you have started collecting any outcome data yet, we would like you to provide baseline equivalents for that sample, effectively your current analytic sample, anybody who has baseline, anybody who has an outcome data point. And then we'd like to compare the baseline equivalents for that sample, which is the sample responding to any follow-up surveys. And if you've already provided data in the last round and you haven't collected any new data, so there might be some people who did enrollment in the fall, say it's a school-based design, you did enrollment in the fall, you haven't collected any outcome data yet, maybe you're not going to collect it till the end of the year, so effectively you have no new data to present to us. In that case, you don't have to present anything in your May 31st reporting. You can just send us a note to say we have not collected, we have not, brought any new sample into the evaluation at this point, and we haven't collected any new outcome data yet. I don't expect many people will fall into that category, but if you do, you can just indicate a note to us. And the other thing is that this is due May 31st, as has been indicated previously. And some people ask, at what point should we cut off the sample to include? Let's say you're still actively enrolling sample right now. And the guidelines we're giving people are to follow the same reporting schedule that you're using for the performance measures. So I'm not sure if that cutoff is, say, February 29th for the data that you need to provide by May 31st. But essentially, whatever that cutoff is a good cutoff to use for us as well, since you'll have to have processed that data anyway. Next slide. So let's talk through the consort diagrams for a moment. I just wanted to mention that there are examples available in the continuation application guidance. Librita sent that around to you, I believe. And there are also templates, Word templates, available online in SharePoint on our SharePoint website, and there'll be a link to that later. So in terms of the consort diagrams, for clustered randomized controlled trials, we need you to do two consort diagrams. The first one, which is describing the cluster intake, and then the second one, which is describing the youth intake. And then in that one, it's important to note that we only need youth who are still in the remaining clusters, and we'll show an example of that in a moment. For individual level RCTs and QEDs, you only need to do the youth intake consort diagram. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And this is just a brief screenshot of what the first consort diagram should look like. This is an example where there's a grantee with clustered random assignment, and grantee X has a cluster randomized controlled trial of a 6th grade program within a single school district. And now we're going to take a look at each of these pieces carefully. And we can go to the next slide. So the first thing that we want to see is a paragraph on the intake process for clusters, and I'm going to read this one as an example. There were 30 schools in the district that were serving 6th grade youth, which is the target population. MOUs were obtained from 22 of the schools. Ultimately, only 20 schools were included in the study due to constraints on staff time. The 20 schools were selected based on school size. The 2 smallest schools with MOUs were not included. So the key items covered here are the eligibility for the evaluation and any exclusions that were made prior to random assignment. It also includes the timing of consent relative to random assignment. They got their MOUs first, and it talks about non-consent. And this is really important for understanding generalizability and representativeness of the initial sample, and is often, sort of lost documentation later on if it isn't put down early in the process. We can go to the next slide. And this is the more traditional components of a consort diagram that you're used to seeing. Essentially, we start out with a number of clusters randomized to treatment and to control, and then it documents some sample loss during the baseline data collection process. So on the right-hand side, you can see there was one comparison school that left the evaluation because the principal left the school and baseline data could not be collected in time. So one thing to note is that you want to make sure your documentation reflects the order in which the activities occurred if it's not apparent. For instance, the random assignment of youth relative to the consent of youth, or the assignment of youth to condition relative to the random assignment of clusters. So you can use our Word templates and move them around to really customize them to fit the design of your study. Next slide. So now we're going to continue with the youth consort diagram for that same evaluation. And you will note that here we're only going to include youth from the 19 studies that are still participating. And the reason for that is that when we do the attrition calculations for the HHS evidence standards, we don't want to double count the loss of students in that one school. So we'll already have factored that in when we look at cluster level attrition. We don't want to count them again when we look at the loss of youth. So here, again, we start with an intake paragraph. This says all 6th grade youth enrolled in the 19 randomly assigned schools as of September 15th were eligible for the evaluation, with the exception of students in self-contained special education classrooms. And then again, it talks about dropping, not including the school that dropped out. And then we go through the number of youth eligible in those schools, the number who consented, refused, didn't return forms. They spec out again the exact number of students who are not eligible. And then we go through those who completed baseline as a percent of as the baseline of those who consented, listing the dates of data collection and the reasons for non-complete. Breaking out the refusals and non-consents are very valuable for examining as you go into the field for future data collection. And also the dates are very important to look for overlap so that there are no confounds in data collection confounds between the two groups. Okay, next slide. So here we're going to construct a similar consort diagram for youth enrolling in an individual level assignment design or in a QED. I won't read the example here. One thing I did want to mention is that while HHS evidence standards don't require attrition to be assessed for quasi-experimental designs, we're asking those who use those designs to provide this because it is really important for determining whether there's been intervention-induced loss and at what stages in the process that has occurred, which can be really important when thinking about your future implementation and the representativeness of your final analytic sample relative to the sample that you started with. Next slide. Again, I'm not going to cover this in detail. It looks much like the other one, but you should absolutely refer back to this as you're doing your examples. One thing to note on the bottom is that the sample sizes in the last two boxes sum to the number of students consented and randomly assigned, not the number of students with baseline data. So in randomized control trials in particular, efforts should be made to collect follow-up data on all students who consented, regardless of whether or not they have baseline data. Okay, let's move on to baseline equivalence. Okay, again, we want pooled data across sites and cohorts. And we're going to focus on variables assessed under the HHS evidence standards, in particular age, gender, and race ethnicity, and measures of sexual behavior. There is an Excel template available on the Evaluation TA website, and there are two tabs in the workbook. There's a blank template for you to use, and there's also a populated example. And if you need to provide baseline equivalents for two samples, that is the whole sample with baseline data, and then the subset of those who also have outcome data, you can just make a copy of that one worksheet and provide us two in the same workbook. The other thing I wanted to mention is there are two different versions depending on the version of Excel that you have. And for those of you who are already provided data to us in the fall, we've revised this template to try to make it more clear where you need to enter data and what the spreadsheet calculates for you. So please use this new version, even if you used the other version previously. So what we're going to ask you to provide is for any binary measures, or those measures that are answered just as a yes-no variable, we're going to need the percent who responded yes, in decimal form. So for example, 0.05, and that's very important. If you just put 5, 10, 15, the statistics aren't going to calculate correctly. And then also the sample size for each measure. For continuous measures, we need the means, the standard deviations, and the sample sizes. And for the categorical measures, such as race, we only need the counts in each category, treatment and control, and we'll look at an example of that in a minute. And then also, just you should provide any documentation of deviations from those basic statistics, such as if you calculate statistical tests accounting for clustering, you can just note that to us in a column on the side. Next slide. So in terms of the required data processing, we try to minimize that, trying to overlap as much as we can with the performance measures, but we know that you will need to construct a race variable, recoding those selecting multiple races into a 2 or more races category so that we have mutually exclusive categories there. You'll also need to construct dummy or binary variables for any of the yes-no survey items for gender and for Hispanicity. And then finally, we're going to ask you to construct full sample sexual behavior variables. So, when we look at baseline equivalence, we want to see is the whole sample equivalent on this measure, so not only the subset that might have answered based on the skip pattern. So essentially, you're going to be imputing zeros or no's anytime that you know the answer to the question based on the skip pattern. So for instance, youth who did not have sex, should be in the questions later on as to how many times they had sex, etc., but coded as zeros. So a specific example is youth that did not have sex in the past 3 months should be coded as 0 in the number of times had sex in the past 3 months and included in the denominator, etc. And you'll go across all the variables and do that for us. And if you have any questions on that, you can certainly follow up with your TA liaison. Next slide. Okay, so I apologize that this is small. The numbers aren't important. We're really just going to review the structure here and the pieces that require data entry. So this is what the new spreadsheet looks like, and this is the part that examines baseline equivalence for demographic measures. The yellow cells are the ones in which you need to enter data, and the shaded and X'd out cells are calculations performed by the spreadsheet or data that isn't needed for you. One thing that we want you to provide sample sizes for every measure because you might have item non-response, particularly for the behavioral measures, or you may not have processed all the data you've collected and that was reflected on the consort diagram, so we will need you item by item to enter sample sizes here. Okay, and so again, one thing that you'll notice that the race ethnicity variable is different than the others. We only need you to enter the counts that are in each category, and then the spreadsheet will calculate a chi-square statistic for you. So one thing some people have asked is whether or not they need to provide data for each of those categories. Sometimes you may not have many people in some of those cells, and they aren't necessarily racial and ethnic groups of interest for your evaluation because they are so small. And in that case, you should absolutely feel free to collapse some of those categories into more meaningful categories for you. Just be sure that you relabel the spreadsheet so that we know the categories that we're looking at. Next slide. Okay, and this is the section of the spreadsheet that looks at the sexual behavior measures. Again, you're going to enter your binary data as decimals, and no standard deviations are required for those. So we can look through. So you'll notice that the sample sizes within each group here are identical, even in the last measure, which is only a small number of people who would have had sexual intercourse in the past 3 months without using effective contraception and had a number of times variable. But again, we want you to impute zeros for everybody who did not make it as far as that question, so that we have a full sample measure. And again, maybe your sample sizes will vary by a few people because of some non-response, but it shouldn't be, say, 2 or 5 kids. And when you really have about 150 kids who answered the survey. I think those are the key points to hit on that. You can go to the next slide. So the templates are located on the Evaluation TA website under Shared Documents, Annual Progress Report Requirements. There are Word templates for the consort diagrams, and then the Excel workbooks for baseline equivalence and the 2 different versions. Again, if you have questions, you should absolutely follow up with your TA liaison or your project officer. And if there are any questions now, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Thank you very much, Jean.
You got it.
We are going to take a look, and I don't believe that there are any questions that have come in at this time. There are no questions at this time. We'll hold for just about 15, 20 seconds to see if anyone enters any last-minute questions.
Sure. Guess not.
I don't see anything coming in, so I think at this point we would like to thank all of our presenters for taking the time to speak with our grantees today. And we would like to thank our grantees for participating in today's webinar. We hope that it was informative and that you found the information useful, and we will look forward to continuing to work with you on the continuation applications and on your projects in general. Thank you so much for your time, and if you have any questions, please contact your project officer. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.